And from Spain, you got a flight to Miami, yeah, in the United States.
Yeah.
So what was the first thing you noticed about the United States? I mean, that's coming from Europe.
I mean, we really wanted to get a boat to try and avoid flying, but we couldn't find one that left for another 2 months, so we had to fly, which we were a bit gutted about because of the environment and stuff. But so we got to Miami, we left London, got to Miami, unpacked our bikes in the airport foyer, cycled straight out the airport. So you're hit by the heat because we've come from London in the middle of winter. This was February. And then you're hit by this heat. And then we're hit with a 6-lane motorway riding on the right. And of course, the exit we want is the far left lane. So we've got to cross 5 lanes of traffic. But I kind of researched it on Google Street View to see where we could get. So we managed that all right. But then it was just, the thing that my first impression was just the sort of scale of the place and the consumerism and the vehicles. All the vehicles were big and gas guzzling, huge engines, and so many of them, and just so much consumerism. So much. It was just consume. But then as soon as you got talking to people and off the highway, it was a really friendly place, which kind of surprised us. So that was the flip side. People were really friendly and welcoming, but as a whole, the country is just like on a treadmill, and it kind of almost feels like climate change isn't happening here, because like you just, everything's disposable, the gas, the fuel, everything's gas guzzling. So
when you buy, if you buy a meal in a lot of places, it's served on cardboard plates and plastic knives and forks,
not
polystyrene. Yeah, that was quite shocking. But on the positive was the people. I mean, the interest in what we were doing, all the way through America, we felt like some sort of mini celebrities. And we almost putting aside up to an hour a day, sort of to factor that in, to stop to talk to people, because they were just so open and interested in the trip, which has been brilliant. And that's helped us sort of relax within the country, and it is a big positive. People sort of almost sneer about the friendliness of the southern states, but goodness me, it is wonderful. It's so, people are just so kind. Texas has this thing. We were in Texas, and we stopped into a little cafe for breakfast, and it was empty. And so the owner just came and plonked herself down and chatted to us. All the staff wanted to know all about the trip. And then when I went to pay, they just said, no, this is complimentary. And I was thanking them so much. And then they said, no, you're in Texas now, you're going to get this kind of kindness. It's how we are. And it's true. Everyone's just been amazing, haven't they?
Yeah.
And the southern states are all like that. I mean, Texas maybe just edges ahead, but they're all, like the driving in Texas, their sign is drive friendly, not drive safely, drive friendly. And there is a difference. They're just that little bit more considerate with the speed they pass you, the amount of space they pass you. It's great. So there's a lot of positives as we've gone on.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, the southern states, they're known for hospitality. You probably heard this is southern hospitality, they like to say.
Yes.
Yeah. We've had our fair dose of that, haven't we?
Definitely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Wow, that's great.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things we've noticed about the States is that massive inequality between the rich and the poor. Like, we came from Miami through the Florida beach communities where some of those houses must be $5-10 million. Crazy money, and gated communities and things like that. And then as you got further into the sort of deep south, Alabama, you saw a lot of towns with huge poverty, towns just dying because no industry and people with very little stuff. And then we hit New Orleans, and I guess it's the same with many cities, but so many tent communities, homeless people passed out in the street, and it's just like, yeah, and people with nothing, people begging on the street, and like, you've just come past a $10 million beach house. It's like, wow, it's a chasm of inequality. It's just crazy to witness, and it's hard to get your head around, because in England there's a lot of poverty and inequality, but I don't think it's quite as extreme at either end, you know.
I mean, on the poverty side, there were also a lot of people you met who, you know, weren't homeless and they didn't have a lot, but there was an awful lot of friendship. I mean, like JC's neighbour, the young girl she had 2 children, and she was living with her grandmother, but they were so open and welcoming to us. And the girl that JC was staying with, again, so open and welcoming. I mean, we just stayed one night, but they looked after some cycle tourists from Japan a few weeks before, who'd ended up staying 9 days. And, you know, they were just so welcoming and so happy to share what they had. So, but there is a lot of grinding poverty, and it's how you get past that, I think, how you get, you know, if you can better your lot. I think it's really hard. And certainly I think COVID's had a massive impact, I would say, on these smaller villages. You know, there were so many, obviously, businesses that have closed down because there's nobody coming through, and you're worrying that what's going to happen as well now the cost of fuel is so exorbitant, if that's going to compound as well.
Yeah. So, yeah, that was quite shocking, the inequality, I think, you know. Yeah.
For such a prosperous country.
Yeah.
Sure. And you were in Louisiana where the Hurricane Katrina happened. So you've seen, sounds like you saw a lot of people in tents, like you said.
Yeah. And a lot of the damage, you could still see where that hurricane hit, and the
trees
just snapped the trees.
Miles,
And the tornadoes. I mean, we've managed to avoid them because it's not really tornado season, but there were a few coming through, and we passed through an area where one had hit the day before, and you could see it was like really an eye-opener to how dangerous they could be, because there was just this line of devastation about 100 meters wide, and all the trees were snapped like matchsticks. There was like debris all over the road where cars had been overturned, and then 100 meters either side, it was like nothing had happened. It was like just like a line of devastation. Just crazy to see.
Yeah, I think we realised we had to pay good attention to the weather forecast, because coming from England, we don't really have extreme weather, you know. I mean, and when you're not cycle touring, you perhaps wouldn't choose to go out on a particularly bad day. But you know, we rode, I think there's one of the films that shows us riding in a thunderstorm, which with hindsight probably wasn't sensible. And but you've got to temper it, you know, you've got to listen to the news and work with the weather. And I know I read it on somebody's blog, they were worried about getting caught in a hurricane, and you know, it's pretty clear the weather forecast says that you would be told if it's happening, as long as you listen to the news, and the locals would look after you if you were in their village, you know, they'd get you into a shelter. But yeah, be aware, I think. You don't need to obsess about it, but be aware of what's happening, I think.